This video series for principals is brought to you by NCPAPA, NCASLD, the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction, and Education NC. Stick around after the lesson for discussions on the topics we'll cover today. NC school leaders receive credit for watching this video. Complete the Google form linked in the description. Then text instruction to 73224.
One of the goals of having quality remote instruction is to continue on reasonably effective learning during an emergency or during special circumstances. And I focus in on that reasonably effective instruction no matter what the physical environment is.
Hi, I'm Tabari Wallace.
And I'm Matt Bristow-Smith.
As instructional leaders in the school building, we know how important instruction has always been. In this new remote context, instruction is more important than ever, especially if you're making up for lost time due to the pandemic.
Let's talk about instruction, starting with the basics. What's your role as a school leader when it comes to managing instruction?
You can find these expectations in Standard 2 of the Standards for School Executives. That's a lot to think about, especially in a remote learning environment. When you hear remote learning, you might think of virtual learning on a computer. But the remote aspect includes a lot more than that. The Department of Public Instruction defines remote learning as learning that takes place outside of the traditional school setting or in conjunction with a hybrid or blended learning environment. Matt, what's the difference between hybrid and blended learning?
Tabari, we've actually used both for a long time, even before the pandemic. Blended learning means that students complete some assignments online in addition to receiving face-to-face instruction. It's really that simple. Hybrid learning is a little bit more involved. In a hybrid setting, there are online components that replace some of the face-to-face instruction. A common example would be when a class is split between students in a classroom and those watching an online stream. If a student receives 100% of their instruction and assignments online, that's what we would call virtual learning. These are all types of remote learning that use the internet in different ways. But Tabari, giving instruction in a remote setting often involves traditional technologies as well.
Printed worksheets and good old-fashioned phone calls are needed to ensure every family is reached, Matt. Remote instruction can be delivered synchronously or asynchronously. Synchronous instruction refers to live instruction where students and teachers are interacting at the same time. Typically, there is a set class schedule. A video conferencing session is an example of synchronous instruction. Asynchronous instruction does not require real-time interaction. Content is available and students are able to access it at times that best suit their schedule. Video lessons posted online in a learning management system is an example of asynchronous instruction.
Everyone is glitching out on my screen. Everyone starts to freeze every second.
Well, that might be an internet problem. Just try to hang tight and hopefully it'll pass, okay? Good job, Julian. Good job, Nico. Very nice, boys and girls. So the word hang is, I'm gonna clear my board so I can write it. H-A-N-G. And then we mark our vowel, and then we mark our vowel combination.
The global pandemic of 2020 forced schools and principals to change very quickly, but change is often difficult and feared. This is called the Nostra model. It attempts to quantify exactly what it takes to implement change successfully. As school leaders, we can use it as a guide to create positive behavioral change. The model consists of 6 elements: vision, consensus, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan. Hey Tabari, let's take a closer look at the importance of each element.
Okay, Matt. Vision. Does this make sense to me? The goal of the vision is to inspire desire. We need to paint a picture of what the change looks like and give end users or stakeholders a reason to care. The more meaningful the change, the more likely the change. It begins with a crystal clear vision. Consensus. Do I agree? You need buy-in and support for your plan from staff and stakeholders. The point of consensus is to create real alignment and agreement on use and outcomes. When everyone can contribute ideas, they're more likely to believe in the project. Skills. Do I actually have what it takes? Enacting change is tough if your staff doesn't have the skill to pull it off. As a leader, it's your job to make sure everybody has the ability to perform and build knowledge where it is needed. Now, Matt, why don't you tell them all about incentives?
Incentives mean what's in it for me. People need to know with certainty how changing will benefit them before they commit to the effort. The incentive or reward must far outweigh the perceived effort or pain of making the change. Make sure stakeholders understand the potential long-term benefits of change that are difficult in the short term. When it comes to resources, do I have what I need? This may be the most straightforward of the 6 elements of change. Doctors and nurses need PPEs, personal protective equipment. Teachers need classroom supplies. Students need books, and so on. Everybody needs resources like time and money to do their part. Action plan. How do I get there? People know where they are. If your vision inspires them, they'll know where they want to go. What they need are clear directions to the new destination. Your action plan should describe exactly how the change will be executed. Together, these are the elements that make change possible. But Tabari, do we really need all of them?
You know, Matt, let's take a look. If your vision is unclear or meaningless to your staff, expect confusion. A lack of consensus means your change is unwelcome and may be met with undesirable behavior or sabotage. If your staff is unskilled for the task at hand, they'll feel anxiety and be incapable of performing. When people feel like they don't know what they are doing, it destroys their sense of autonomy. What about incentives, Matt?
Tabari, when incentives are insignificant or obscured, you may see signs of resistance in staff. Those who can handle the change won't necessarily want to. And without adequate resources, expect enormous frustration. After all, there is little worse than getting excited about a goal and beginning a journey only to discover you're missing a critical piece needed to accomplish it. And finally, if your action plan is incomplete or unclear to your staff, you'll create undue fatigue. False starts and wasted effort kill motivation. So create a plan and stick to it. That's the Nostra model. So how does it work, Tabari, in practice?
Let's consider a district initiative for a new math curriculum. Even without teacher buy-in or consensus, a school leader can purchase new resources and plan professional development. But missing teacher investment will likely result in a poor implementation, angry staff, and hours of extra time. A lack of teacher buy-in might point to larger issues. Are teachers frustrated with a lack of planning time required for the new curriculum? Do they need support to build new skills? These elements of change are synergistic. Planning for each one individually means that all are more likely to be covered. As you plan, implement, and reflect on the process of change in your school, remember that the Nostra model is a helpful framework.
Well, I know we always talk about the importance of being intentional when it comes to our teaching practice, but for me, this has really taken on a whole new meaning. I've really had to take a hard and close look at our standards and decide what is most important. Out of everything, what do I absolutely need for my students to know in order for them to be successful? From there, I really had to manage my time wisely to ensure that I'm hitting those areas hard and frequently enough that I'm able to see the growth that I would in my traditional classroom. And unlike the traditional classroom, I actually end up having less instructional time and less teachable moments. So for me, this has made group instructions even more important because I'm able to not only assess what they're learning at the moment, but also I've been able to use it to help keep my students engaged during the limited amount of time that I have them.
These are recommendations for instructional leaders published by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction. Since we're talking about instruction today, let's focus on one point in particular: supporting teachers in implementing remote instruction. Here are several ways you can do just that. Encourage regular, at least once or twice per week, virtual PLC meetings that also include virtual supports. Create opportunities for tech-savvy teachers to share strategies for creating lesson plans that utilize technology. Offer opportunities to share successes and brainstorm trouble spots. Create space for your specialists, counselors, and other staff to hold office hours to provide another resource for students. Encourage teachers and teacher assistants to reach out to students on a regular basis to ensure students feel connected and supported.
Ultimately, principals serve as the educational leaders of their schools. It's fundamentally their responsibility to ensure all students are getting high-quality instruction that works for them. Doing that requires an understanding of both online teaching methods and the needs of the local community. School leaders should help teachers evaluate how well their materials work in digital formats, how well they align to standards, how well the formats encourage student engagement, how mastery is assessed, whether or not there is deliberate practice with feedback, and how well targeted interventions and opportunities are delivered. Crises tend to expose inequities in our society, and students in the most vulnerable communities may need extra support, whether technical or emotional, to stay connected to instruction. It is important that you understand the needs of students so you can help your teachers provide for them.
When we first went remote in March, we just decided right off the bat in that 24 hours that we changed, we created this Google Doc just with all kinds of worksheets and units and things of that nature, just to help any teacher. It was kind of like a bowl of things that you could go to find different information. And then we also share amongst teachers a lot. So we use our learning management system, Canvas, and we share videos of maybe teaching main idea or of teaching this certain standard. And we share that between each other and really between grade levels too, just in case it might work to save time, energy. And, you may have another teacher that's great at teaching main idea, and you could pull from that and use that as well. One thing our academic coach does is every PLC meeting, she really leaves us with something that she's found out in the internet somewhere that we can use in class. Whether that be, she brought Slides Mania to us, and it makes slideshows much more engaging for students. It's not just some boring PowerPoint anymore. So she's provided that to us. And then our PTA bought us vocabulary, which has been excellent, especially as an ELA teacher. It's brought vocabulary instruction alive and a little bit more fun for students.
Shortly after the pandemic began, many schools operated in an emergency mode, or what we call pandemic pedagogy. This is not sustainable. As administrators strive to ensure high-quality instruction, here are a few recommendations that should not be forgotten about the online environment. These are from an article, Crossing the Bridge, by Christine Volker for QualityMatters.org, in which she discusses strategies to move away from emergency instruction methods to quality online learning.
And here they are. Focus on foundational design. Teachers must create actionable, measurable learning objectives and determine how they will be assessed. Then they shall align learning activities, materials, and technologies to set clear expectations for teaching and learning. Elevate engagement. Engaged learners feel a sense of belonging and are active participants in the online learning community. Although engaging students can be difficult, it is really dependent on course design. The activities, content, and technologies chosen can help elevate engagement. Maximize your presence. Presence is something that must be purposefully designed into an online course in thoughtful ways. The 3 types of presence correspond to the 3 types of interaction. Teaching presence. Teachers should focus their time during the course on interacting with and guiding students via feedback, check-ins, office hours, announcements, and more. Social presence. Social presence is crucial for your students. It allows them to feel like they are a part of a learning community rather than simply being a participant in a remote class. Cognitive presence. Cognitive presence focuses on the quality cognitive engagement. How are teachers sparking that intellectual curiosity from day one? Matt, why don't you tell us a little bit about the last two?
Thanks, friend. Online policies and practices. It's important to share information on these topics so students and families know what to expect and how to govern themselves. And you're not alone in your journey. Make sure to reach out to other administrators about the strategies that they are implementing to overcome barriers. What innovative strategies are they using to solve some of the very same problems that you are experiencing? I reach out to Tabari all the time to get his input to help me solve problems that I'm facing at my school.
Thanks for watching this webinar. Thanks for your leadership in our schools, and thank you for being champions for children. But a special thanks to my friend Matt for your leadership and your friendship.
This has been a production of NCPAPA, the North Carolina Principals and Assistant Principals Association. Thank you, Tabari, for being such a great mentor for North Carolina's principals, and to all of our school leaders creating a brighter future for North Carolina Public Schools.
So let's just jump right in. If you could share what strategies you use to facilitate high quality instruction in your school.
I'll start off and say that it's certainly been interesting feeling our way through this process. But what we've discovered after a few months now is that there are some key points. One thing that we found is that it's critically important for the students to have easy access. That if they have to log in through multiple screens and multiple applications, oftentimes that will get them off track from the beginning. So the first thing I'd say is simplicity and an easy way to access the applications. Secondly, we found that it's really important to provide the ability to provide feedback to students. Sometimes teachers get in the habit of presenting information and teaching lessons, but in the remote environment, the ability to provide timely feedback is really important, and teachers use this, and they use a variety of applications, but that process of providing the feedback is really important. We've also found that one key is that the lessons, the sessions have to be interactive. They cannot be all one-way traffic. And again, teachers use a variety of strategies, a variety of applications, but they have to find a way to make it interactive and engage the students. Early on, that was something that teachers struggled with because they were teaching lessons just like they might teach them in a classroom, but they were not able to interact with the students as well. So we've had to go back and sort of redouble our efforts to be sure that they are interactive. But I'd say there's one overarching thing that we found that's really, really important. And that is that the teachers have to change their mindset. That the teachers have to adjust what they are doing. And it's not about bells and whistles. It's not so much about technology. It's more about the teacher's mindset. And a lot of this goes to the amount of content that they're trying to get across to students. We found that across the board, all of our teachers have started off, when they started off remote learning, they were attempting to teach the same amount of content that they did when the kids were in front of them. And it cannot be done. So they have to adjust that mindset. The second thing is that the teachers have to adjust the timelines that they put out there, because again, they try to abide by the same timelines and guidelines that they did when the students were physically in front of them, and that just can't be done. It's just not the same in a remote environment. And the final thing, adjustment in this mindset, is the grading practices that teachers use. They have to adjust their grading practices because it is not the same remotely learning as it is learning in person. So again, I think probably the most important part of having effective interactive remote instruction is this idea of the teachers changing their mindset.
So I agree with Matt, and I will add in about facilitating high quality instruction in our school that when we were in emergency remote learning in the spring, what we learned was that our teachers needed a remote learning lesson plan. They needed a model. We needed to streamline and all use the same LMS so that I'm a mom of children across multiple schools. I have 3 children of my own, and in remote learning, I was having to access lots of different things to help my children. So like Matt said, streamlining that process and also giving them the remote learning lesson plan and an exemplar in that LMS to follow. I feel like once we got that knowledge of emergency remote learning, which we all know was a learning process, so we were able to go into the spring with those scaffolds in place, to have our PLC team talks streamlined to our instructional framework of the I do, you do, we do together part of that. So I feel like through those scaffolds, making sure the PLCs knew what the expectations were, we have seen our remote learning instruction greatly improve. The modeling of digital learning strategies that are interactive has been a huge piece, so that the adults are seeing that through staff meetings that we're doing virtually. Also differentiated professional development based on remote learning PDP goals is something that we are requiring weekly, because no one is an expert at this moment, and that the mindset is so important of knowing we are all continuing to have to grow. Veteran teachers may not be the experts right now. It may be beginning teachers who are able to adapt more quickly, and so I think that mindset, as Matt said, is huge in this. And so I think right now our jobs as administrators is to offer those clear expectations, give as much scaffolding as we can, and just like we want our teachers to give frequent feedback, that we are giving consistent and frequent feedback and praise to our staff, because like I said, nobody is an expert. And so every growth that they have, just like with our students, offering them that feedback and praise so that we all, students and staff, continue to grow in remote learning.
Thank you, Beth. So this next question is, if you were asked to give advice to principals and providing support for teachers who are struggling to make that transition. We've said it's new for everyone. No one is an expert, but some teachers may be struggling more than others. And so giving advice to maybe a fellow principal that had some teachers that were struggling to make that transition to teach into that remote environment, what would some of those pieces of advice look like?
From my perspective, the first thing that I would say is that teachers are looking for a silver bullet. They're looking for pixie dust. They're looking for that one magic application, that one magic piece of software that's going to fix everything. And the bottom line is that there is no magic bullet. My advice is, number one, you have to keep it simple. And the more simple, the word Donna used was streamlined. The more streamlined it is, the better. The second thing is this idea of concentrating on the basic instructional principles that you use in the classroom. And that is a quality lesson to the standards. It is engaging the students. It is providing timely feedback, and it's starting that feedback loop. Often teachers are thinking that technology is the key and that the application of the platform is the key. when actually the process is the same. They just need to do it remotely. And again, the more simple it is, the more streamlined it is, I think the more effective it is. Bells and whistles are nice, but I've seen several teachers who have, to be honest, they've kind of made it very difficult on themselves because they've tried to use new technology, and they found a new app that somebody else used, and they thought that was going to make the situation better and make the learning process better, when in fact that just complicated it more. So my main advice would be to keep it simple. The other thing that Donna said I think is really important is that you do identify your people that are ahead of the curve, and you put them in front of your staff. Again, working in PLTs is really important. But when we started this, we didn't have a template for what it looked like. So everybody went out and tried to invent one on their own. Well, now we've had the opportunity to identify our teachers that are doing very, very well. And in some cases it is younger teachers, teachers who have less experience. It's been easier for them to change. So I would agree with what Donna said, and I would find an exemplar, I'd find a template, and tell people to keep it simple. Just follow this formula. Don't try to reinvent the wheel.
I do agree with that I think it's all about having clear expectations and making sure that teachers are able to follow a plan that is effective, but like Matt said, the simple, streamlined process. I would also say that giving grace to teachers is important right now, but also standing firm in doing what's right for children. So there is a line in there that as administrators, we are all trying to walk right now, of giving grace, but making sure that we have those clear expectations to do what is right for children, making sure that you're coaching the person, not the problem. So if the problem is not doing effective technology, what can you do with that person? And it is oftentimes finding a teammate or an expert in the building to help build their capacity. And I think that will go further than maybe that I would offer that advice to a colleague, that finding somebody within the building who can help you coach that person will build more capacity and trust, because administrators are not in the classroom every day doing this. So we are just trying to find experts and guide and model to continue to build capacity.
So I guess my next question is, if you would share some of the biggest challenges that you've had with teachers in meeting the expectations that you've established for high quality instruction. And then maybe if you'd share some of the things that you're doing to address those challenges as we've transitioned to this remote learning.
I'd go back to something I mentioned earlier, and that is the change of mindset. By far, the mindset has been the biggest hurdle to overcome, more so than connectivity, more so than devices, more so than students not being engaged. Our biggest issue has been the mindset of the teachers, and that is it's been very, very difficult for them to realize that remote learning is not the same as in-person learning, and that they cannot have the same expectations. They can't have the same timelines, can't have the same grading practices. And I'm not sure, because we kind of said that from the beginning, but I think it's taken the teachers time to realize that. Going back to this idea of the more veteran teachers sometimes being making it harder for them to change, because they have a mindset of, I need to cover this much to get the kids ready for the EOC or to get them ready for the next course, and they just have a hard time changing that. And so that to me has been the biggest challenge. Fortunately, I think we've had some support from the district with grading practices, and the message in our district has been consistent, and that is that remote learning is different and we have to change. So you guys know how it is when they hear it from their principal, it's one thing, but when it's the consistent message district-wide, that really changes and makes it a lot better. So I'd say that's been the biggest challenge for us. And again, you know, I'm in a big high school, comprehensive high school, teaching lots of courses, lots of levels, AP courses, honors courses, we typically provide a lot of freedom and autonomy to our teachers because they're the professionals. But in this case, we've had to maybe provide more structure and go back and have them really look at how much they're teaching and what their expectations are.
I think for us, a huge challenge has been that we've worked for so many years to focus on collaborative learning practices with teachers, really working with them, making sure that they were using Chris and Kagan's strategies and thinking maps and having flexible seating in classrooms and having, you know, students in groups. So when remote learning came, it was like, what do we do now? And so I think the default was a lot of sit and get, like really going back to teacher directed lessons in that remote learning, students just maybe doing multiple choice, you know, it just wasn't what we had really worked to grow for as a school. And I think our teachers, it wasn't that they didn't want to do it. It was just, they didn't know how. And so for us, that really has been one of the hardest things, is how do you bring in all of those elements into remote learning? And I do feel like through those scaffolds, like Matt said, through the district really leading a lot of those scaffolds that we have gotten back, here's how you do some collaborative work in the remote learning. Here is how you create a thinking map with your students virtually. So I do feel like we're bringing those things back and really getting the cognitive load shifted back to students so that our 80-20 isn't skewing back to adults. Because, you know, when you've come so far with something, part of the hard part with remote learning was you felt like your feet got knocked out from under you, teacher and administrator both, of work you'd done in the school. And so I feel like we've come a long way with that, a long way with getting back to our instructional framework. So I'm very proud of teachers for all they've done to adapt and overcome and really do what is right for children. A continual challenge in remote learning is what to do with those students who are not doing the work. And I think teachers get really focused, because we're a community of fixers, really focused on how do we get these remote learners to get involved who are not. And so that has been a big challenge, to keep our teachers' mindset on, let the administrator, social worker, let this team help you with those folks. And you continue to try to, you know, just work diligently with everybody who is showing up to the lessons, and continue to have your office hours and to do all this work. And we're here to help support you in the rest. So make sure that your communication is really good, and documentation. And so I think that has been a challenge too, for teachers to know where their line is, that they have to say, I need help. I need somebody to step in and help me locate these children, or help me get these assignments from students. So things that we have done is consistent MTSS meetings to focus on who's getting the work done and who do we need assistance for with social emotional learning needs, curriculum needs, and just for the school communication to continue to be unified, even if we're working in remote learning settings.
I'd like to take this time to thank you both so much for sharing your time and your expertise.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much. Y'all have a good afternoon.
So Donna and Matt, if I could, if you guys have maybe 2 more minutes, I just wanted to end that. That's the panel. If you don't, and that's fine too. I was going to ask this one question, and that was the one I added, so it's not on here. And I'm not even sure we're going to use it, but I think it's something, if it could be worth looking at. If you could change one thing to improve remote learning experience for students, what would it be? So you might want to just kind of think about that. And if you have something to say, and we'll just use that as a cutaway, not necessarily, it's not part of the panel questions, but if there was something that you could, one thing you could change to improve the remote learning experience for students, what would that be?
I think I'd go back to that idea of providing more structure for teachers on the front end. Again, we tend to give our teachers a lot of autonomy and our PLTs a lot of control over the process. And I think that we probably did not provide enough structure for teachers going forward. And so they went in a lot of different directions. And I think we've been successful in bringing them back, but I don't think that we were cognitive enough about what a big change this was, not just in the technology piece, but as I said before, in the mindset piece. So if we were going to do it again, I would provide more guidance, more structure, a template. We did some videos of teachers as exemplars, but I think that we didn't follow through. We didn't provide teachers with enough support. And again, hindsight's 2020, but I think we've seen that over a period of time that they really needed more structure. And again, sometimes I think they got lost, they got bogged down in the technology piece, in what platform to use, and do you use Canvas, or are you using Google Classroom, or using Padlet, or are you using, and they became more enamored with that, thinking that was going to be the key to good instruction. But again, I think just going back to the process of good teaching, and giving them more examples of that and more support with that would have been helpful.
I agree with Matt on that. Seen a lot of people sidetracked by Bitmoji classrooms in elementary school and all the bells and whistles and the cutesy part to that. And that ultimately is not, what's best for kids or growing kids, to get sidetracked in those things. I would add, so we did some parent orientation sessions, brought parents in individually, families in individually, in August when we were going to start this. And I think that was great to have. We scheduled about an hour per family to go over all the remote learning expectations. If I had to go back in time though, I would make those less about the parents and more about the children. So it was like we were preparing families for how to do remote learning, but I just don't know that we sent them home with enough books to read with their younger children, enough materials. We were kind of scrambling. And so now it's been, how do we get those things out to parents now at this point? And so I do feel like if I was going to go back in time and redo something for remote learning, I would have spent more time on the front end preparing students and parents for all that this semester was going to be. And we would do it again in January, in a perfect world, to make sure that our remote learners, I worry about literacy. Do they have enough books in their homes? And do they have a way to access that? Because much different than Matt, but in elementary school, that touch of a book, those print concepts, reading left to right, you can't replace that with technology. And I'm a digital fan, but you can't, there's nothing that you can replace for a kindergartner or a first grader outside of just having a book in their hand to read. So I wish we had spent more time doing that in the beginning.
If we could just start by perhaps you telling us, what is remote instruction?
Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. Remote instruction brings to mind several different definitions, but if you look at it in the purest definition, it is teaching and learning that is divided only by time and space. However, we know as we've all shifted to remote instruction almost globally, certainly impacted in the state, it's our ability to continue teaching and learning that allows for interaction between the student and the teacher that's reasonably effective during this time of emergency.
Great. So what are some key elements that are critical for providing high quality instruction in the remote environment? And then maybe how does this compare with the high quality instruction in a traditional setting?
Well, certainly there are many that are the absolute same that's going to deliver high quality in no matter which environment. But one of the things that we have seen and are seeing that are most effective is the ability to be flexible. When we are dealing with new environments for teaching and learning, being flexible and giving up some of that control while maintaining a student-centered environment for control of pace, modality, is one of the most key features. The again, connecting individually with each of the students is also very important. We are hearing frequently how our students are feeling isolated. So the ability to connect with those students individually, and you'll probably hear me say that repeatedly, because that is one of the most important things. And that's also important in a traditional classroom. Is, we always say that relationship piece. Well, that's even more important now, as we know that our students might be home and feeling isolated from their normal environments. And that could be intentional lesson design by the teacher, as well as setting up activities where students can connect with each other. Maybe it's through virtual rooms. But also, I have to go back to clear instructional expectations. That is the same in both environments, but it's even more important in the remote instruction environment. Clear expectations for the students to know how much time that it's going to take them to log in, how much time they need to work. And also, and I'll talk about this later too, is some of that time has got to be adjusted. It can't be the same amount of time. And I don't want to send the wrong message here. That time might need to be shortened as well. But the student engagement is also going to be important, that how you are lesson designing for that, where you are still providing equity and choice in everything you do. And so importantly is feedback on student work. Because so much gets lost with the interpersonal relationships sometimes, and the communication that's done that's nonverbal, that you have to do a much more effort to give feedback and teach through that feedback on students' work. And that really leads to that social and emotional component where students lose that feeling of isolation. They feel like that you are reading and responding to everything that they do, and it helps with that feeling of connectedness. I would also say is make sure you are focusing on preparing for collaboration, and I cannot stress enough that you might need to think differently about classroom management. And that goes back to me saying, giving up a little bit of control, more scaffolding than normal, shorter times, still use music. Still play games just like you would in that physical classroom to keep students engaged. And don't be afraid of instructors and even principals doing some goofy things that you might feel goofy doing it, to keep students engaged in the learning, and also respecting the privacy. We hear a lot, you are literally making a home visit if you are doing a synchronous classroom, or if you are planning individual or small group visits with students, you are in their home. And so respecting that that is a home visit, and that because we are in remote instruction, you might need to do things differently than you normally would in a regular classroom. And again, remembering that you have tested and planned for everything. Just like in a traditional classroom, things will not work and some things will go wrong. So still having that plan B, have that backup plan, just as you normally would. And if you are someone who is new to using a lot of digital technology tools and platforms that you might not have used in the past, that's something you might want to think through more and plan for. And of course, reward, reward, reward. We are motivated a lot by simple things, those intrinsic things that says, you did a great job. I really like how you are participating today. Those are the things that you can't stop doing, and maybe even need so more, because our goal is to create this sense of community and a sense of connectedness. And you have to work harder for that in the remote environments, and incorporating that engagement through all those things. And then a basic strategy that I would encourage all instructors to use is, personalized learning is always a good idea. But in remote learning, it's even more critical than in a traditional classroom, because it's easier to lose students. It's easier for students to hide. And so a basic strategy is creating these tiered learning targets for students. So those are just some of the things that I would say, and I hope I didn't give you too much information, but some critical elements for the effective remote instruction.
No, that was excellent. So sort of along those same lines, I want you to think about maybe the principals as they're kind of creating this high quality remote learning environment in their schools with their staff. What are some important considerations that principals need to be thinking about?
Increased communication. Just like I said with effective instruction, I call it the Hansel and Gretel model. I don't know how many people are familiar with that story, that fairy tale, but you want breadcrumbs all along the way so no one can get lost. And that includes your teachers not getting lost. That includes your students and parents not getting lost. They need to know exactly where they need to be at any given point in time. And you've communicated so clearly. And that communication is not just verbal, it is written, it is documented. When you have these data rooms that your teachers can go into and they have visual clues on the walls, you might need to recreate some of that virtually, just as you would for your students. So the communication here is key, just as it is with effective instruction. And then one of the things that you want to do as a principal is that you're still the glue. You are still the glue that holds that school together. And so all the things that you do in a traditional environment is with monitoring of instruction, you will still need to do. So I think it would be very important for a principal to still drop in on synchronous instruction. Their teachers need to know that they are there to see and support them. But what it does for students, just like when a principal walks into the classroom in a traditional building, the reaction is even more profound in a virtual setting, because here you are to support their learning as well. And when you do that, you're modeling for teachers, you're modeling for students, you're modeling for the parents who are in the background that, we are still focused on teaching and learning. And as the instructional leader of this school, I am monitoring what the effectiveness of that looks like. And another part that I think it's really important for principals to monitor right now is the turnaround time in communication. I know that teachers are still receiving a lot more inquiries than normal, but it is important to monitor how long it takes that teacher or that counselor or support person to turn around that communication. And so that's gonna be another area that I would suggest that principals look at to make sure that they are still leading in a way that ensures high quality instruction. And one of the things that I also would say that staying connected with your staff, if that's just a casual, let's grab a cup of coffee, like we might would do traditionally, and come together and just tell me how you're feeling. And it really comes back to staying visible. You know, a strong principal is visible on all fronts, and doing those things that maintains that visibility to all your stakeholders. And that's really important with parents in the K-5 arena. We know that our youngest learners are struggling more because they are emerging readers and they don't have that independent learning set up yet. So making sure that you have that access and that visibility with them as well is so important. And I think that these are times that principals can be more creative in how they interact with many of their stakeholders. But instructional monitoring, that still needs to happen, and that still needs to occur now more than ever.
Great. So I think as we move from that conversation of just building that environment, as you said, and communication we certainly know is key. Let's talk a little bit about the role that you see the administration, principals, and assistant principals playing with regard to ensuring that high quality remote instruction is happening in the classroom. And I know you mentioned the monitoring of instruction, and how maybe does that compare with their role in the traditional setting?
Well, certainly many of those are going to be the same, but I think as it compares to monitoring, some of it's easier because everything is going to be more digital, so you can monitor what students are turning in, the feedback that a teacher has given. And I mentioned monitoring the live synchronous instruction, but it's also important to monitor that asynchronous instruction. You know, one of the things that you want to think about, and we talk about shorter times, is do you have staff members that might be recording a whole group instruction for 60 minutes? And how did that help with engagement? How can you coach that teacher in synchronous instruction? Because we still see a lot of this happening where you are recording your traditional instruction. You will need to be able to lead and coach your teachers how to do that effectively. Certainly when you are recording and posting a video of yourself teaching, you want to plan for engagement, and you as the principal will have to work a little harder because you're going to now have to go watch those videos and see how did that help students learn, and do you need to coach that teacher and how they might can scaffold that and build in more participation. So the pros and cons are it's all there for you to see in a way that is easier to see because you can log into the different teachers' platforms and classrooms, and you can monitor the instruction somewhat easier. But then on the other hand, it is all there for you to see, and your time is going to be very limited. But monitoring is the same. The more monitoring of quality instruction that you can do and provide feedback to your teachers is still going to give you those same big wins on the outcomes for your students.
Great. So and now I know we've talked a lot about that high quality remote learning environment, and earlier you mentioned other stakeholders. And so I just, with our final question, would like for you to speak to maybe what considerations should be made for parents with regard to remote learning.
I think parents provide, and caretakers, right? Many of our students are not with their parents while they are learning on a remote instruction day or asynchronous day. So I think we also have to be very mindful of the caretakers who are also helping our students. I think we need to understand that parents are not educators and caretakers are not educators. So often they bring many backgrounds. The school fear is one of them, and trust. Do they trust us? Do they fear us? Did they have a bad experience in school and want to stay away and feel very uncomfortable with interaction with the school? So I think that one of the things that we have to really work at as we work with our parents as administrators is being transparent with them. If you've done something that didn't go so well in your school, just admit it and just say, hey, we tried this didn't work. We're going to now try this. I think when you can build that sense of transparency and trust and understand the various backgrounds your parents are coming from, it is so important to use layman's terms with your parents. We use so many abbreviations. They don't understand synchronous to asynchronous to log in here. You really need to be very careful about the vocabulary that you are using. And if there is certain educational vocabulary that you have trained your teachers in, your parents and caretakers in exactly what that is. Just as I said, the clear expectations with students, your expectations that you have set for teachers. And when I go back to that, how often should a teacher be online? How often should they call? One of the things I used to say as a principal is I haven't clearly communicated with my student unless I have also communicated with the parent. Many times teachers will send a message out and you think something has been communicated, but they send it to the student. So one of your jobs is to make sure that communication is going to the parent is in a way that they understand. So, yeah, we all can live and die on the communication platform and making sure that that communication is in multiple formats. Is it text? Is it a phone call? So many of our parents don't have phones in the homes now. So making sure that that communication is clear, that and that it is received with all of our parents and caretakers. Also in remote instruction, as we all know, we are using many technology platforms and simplifying that as much as possible. You want to try to standardize what is being used. So as you work with your parents, you can have as a simple approach as possible and train them as well as the student clearly in what are the expectations. And that is expectations. I would want to see a checklist, if you will, of what each student has to turn in and by when and how they turn that in and how they are counted present in the classroom. There is a lot of confusion for parents and caretakers as what marks a student present and did they meet the expectations. So again, clear expectations that are documented, that are clear to the teacher, they're clear to the parent and the caretaker, and they're clear to the student. We hear a lot about students not participating, students getting lost, and I think it is that principal's probably responsibility and easier for them to set those expectations to the parents of how students need to attend. I would also encourage principals to make sure that they know how to communicate with their parents. And you might need to have several different parent groups because every parent, again, is coming to you with different backgrounds and different needs. So I think one of the things that I see our K2 teachers doing really well is how they clearly share, that weekly folder, and this is what you need to learn this week, and parent, you're going to sign here. I think if our principals can help our teachers communicate that clearly with all of their parents and those clear expectations, clearly laying out what needs to be done, it will be very preemptive to solve many problems on the outcome of this.